Hey, Discover Church family, it's Pastor Steve here, and I want to introduce you to another friend of mine. You're meeting a lot of my friends. This is Gabriel from Romania, but as you can see, he is currently residing in Saudi Arabia. How are you, Gabriel?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thank you.
I know you're a real busy guy, so it's great to have you on our show, our podcast. We're sharing this on YouTube, X, Facebook, and a lot of people will be listening to this. We were together climbing Mount Sinai, having a good time, and suddenly the Lord kind of struck us with this big need in the body of Christ. And I think a lot of pastors that are listening to us are going to appreciate this. There's this weird phenomenon um, in some countries like Korea. They're calling it a national crisis. People aren't getting married. They're not getting married, or they get married, or they're in a relationship and they won't have children. And so we're talking about this about, God's perfect will for our lives. We're both married guys. We both have done single ministries. You did it where, Gabriel? Your single ministry?
So I lived in Romania up until the age of 24, and I was involved a lot with the youth ministry there and then young adults, but also in the Emirates where I lived for quite a few years. Yeah, part of a church that probably had about 60-70% of people were unmarried, single.
Right. So that's in the Emirates, means the United Arab Emirates, yeah? Dubai?
Yes, yes, in Dubai.
Right.
In Dubai.
Okay. And did you also meet your wife there?
As a matter of fact, yes, that's where I met her.
God's amazing. God can bring two people together. And I know your wife is Romanian and you're Romanian, and you end up meeting in the United Arab Emirates. So anything's possible. This is why we want to propose to pastors and singles out there. Maybe you need to get out of your rut, out of where you're comfortable, and go to a very different place. And we're going to suggest to you a very exotic location, very beautiful location that most of you have never thought of, never been to, and yet it's gorgeous. And we'll introduce that to you later. But we just thought, here we are, two happily married guys with kids, and we'd like to use our experience and our knowledge and our travels. We go everywhere around the world, both of us. And so we want to help singles. And before we say how, I just want to go through the current dating um, environment because it's so different than what I'm used to. Like I've never used a dating app. Are you in that generation where you use dating apps before you got married?
I actually did not. I was quite against dating apps,
Okay,
at least when I was looking for a wife.
right. So we're gonna have listeners who some of them are totally for dating app, that's their life, and some who are like probably like us, we didn't use it or we are even against it. But they say something like 80% now of people who date, they're finding each other online. So I want to go through a little bit of this. And then obviously I'm going to present it. My bias is it does work for some people, but nothing beats flesh and blood contact. Like you're meeting each other face to face in person. That's the way it's been for thousands of years. And there are countries where the fertility rate is not low, the marriage rate hasn't declined. And I want to show you what is it like in Arabia. Even if you're not Arabian, this is the culture of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we can go back and look at the Middle East and see probably the closest thing to what the biblical courtship and the biblical marriage was like. So I'm going to pick your brain on that because I know you know a lot of guys who single got married, the courtship process, what they go through. Sometimes it doesn't work, but there's a lot more, married, happily married people with children in the Middle East. They don't seem to have as big of a problem. So we're going to find out about that, and I'll show you a bunch of things. But let's go through this study because there has been a study now that we've accumulated a lot of data about people's habits, singles' habits from all of these dating apps. There have been studies now, and they've just statistically graphed out what are single people doing, what are they interested in. So here, the first graph you can see is men's perception of women's attractiveness. It's a scale of 1 to 5, very rudimentary, okay? Like 1, 0 is ugly, right? 0 is ugly, One is so-so. But if you're between two and four, you're average. And four and five, you're knockout, stunning, beautiful, attractive. All right. So you can see this is the men's perception of women. It very much follows what we call the traditional bell curve. You would expect very ugly, very pretty to be on the extremes, and that's how men perceive uh, women in reality. And then they think that, say, 75% of women are pretty good. 75% are pretty good. Another 8%, they're just knockout. All right. So, from a man's perspective, this is good news for a woman because most men find most women attractive or acceptable. Yeah. Now, it changes drastically when you go to women's perception of men. So, have a look at this. Again, one would be ugly. Two is, one to two is ugly. And then from two to four is average. And then five is just you're a stud, you're a hunk of a man. That's very strange because we need the percentage on that, but that's the majority, by the way. The majority of women perceive the majority of men as unattractive. Some are average looking, and there's almost none in their eyes that measure up to the modern women's eyes. There's not many fives, not even that many four. You can see it just it tapers off almost to none. And this behavior is a change from sociological studies that women's expectations have risen, like skyrocketed in terms of what they expect a man to be. Because the mystery right now is why are people finding it so hard to get married? For the ones that are looking for a relationship, they're saying to me in church after church, it seems hard to find a good man or a good woman. And men's perspective of or perception of women have not really changed, but women's definitely has. And if we just graph this out, okay, in terms of numbers, uh, women perceive only one out of six men. Take a look at this because three would be the average, right? On a scale of one to five, you'd say three is in that middle zone. You're pretty much average. So if you're above average, you're three and above. Only one out of six men are considered better than average, according to women. Of course, statistically, that doesn't make sense, right? It should be 50 is below average, 50 is above average, but something has changed in the woman's brain and perception of men. Only one out of six are above average. So that's five out of six seem like they're not attractive to women. And it gets worse in terms of women's perception of IQ. So again, 100, if you have an IQ of 100, that means you are the average guy. It should be the normal IQ, like normal average person has got a 100. You're above 100, you're smart. You're below 100, you're not so smart or not so educated. Women perceive that 58% of men are dumb. That's the majority. Dumb meaning that they are barely reaching 90 in IQ score, 90 and below. So 90 to 85 to 70. That's how women see men. Um, Average is 100. So again, you're looking at that one out of six they think is average intelligence or greater, and then the majority of men. Women perceive. This is not an IQ test. This is a perception test. How do women see men? And that's really makes it very difficult if that's the perception. Now, all this data comes from these apps, which I don't know, but I've heard some of them match Tinder, Plenty of Fish, OK Cupid, Pairs, Two. All right, so we're gathering data from all of these apps. And what the researchers found is that the app actually also influences the women's behavior and perception. So if you go on a more, uh, what would you say, an app that is aimed to for people to find their lifelong mate, like Match, women's perception of attractiveness goes back to almost like the bell curve. The majority of men are going to be average, right? And a good portion, much more than 1 out of 6, is going to be better than average. But when you move over to Tinder, all right, which is different from Match in that it's aiming for people to casually hook up, to be more promiscuous, to have one night stands, suddenly women's perception are just completely skewed, and they see that there's almost nobody that is attractive to them. So when you look at this, we can graph it out. Match would be considered a more serious dating app. OkCupid is considered average, and Tinder is like just promoting promiscuity. Anti-Bible, unscriptural behavior, just casual sex is what they're looking for. You can see that when your belief changes, or the app that you go to caters to a different kind of belief in marriage and sex and ideology, then the women's perception also changes. So I think here we have a huge clue as to why people are finding it harder to get married. So have you seen this before, and what do you think about it?
We're showing the graph. I was also wondering what is the reason behind saying that for a woman, right? Is you're looking attractiveness. A lot of things can attract a woman in a man. So it could be the physical part, but I think, and I wonder if these graphs are they at the beginning, or they're just looking for someone, or after a while, when they've been in a conversation with a person, because it does matter. Meeting the person face to face will change your perception and your attractiveness. It's not the same. You don't have the same uh, image of the person once you get to meet her or him. So yes, I think it based on the platform, what exactly they cater to. If it's Tinder, okay, whatever you first see there. If you're looking for sex, you're looking for the hottest guy or girl, and you go for that. Whereas I don't know Match, but probably if it has a bell curve there, it's more about uh, probably a long-term relationship. And I would dare to say, not advertising for this app, but probably it's more towards a deeper interest in the person than just physical attraction. Would you agree with that?
Well, exactly. We're not trying to promote any of these apps. And you brought up an interesting point, is what does it mean, attractiveness? So that's exactly the next slide. They measured attractiveness according to these criteria. What does a woman consider attractive? Physical attractiveness, ambition, intelligence, mutual interests, sincerity, or truthfulness, I would say, right? Is a person very truthful, very sincere, and fun? Okay. So when they ask women, what is your preference? Women are basically, they want everything. They say they want all of those things pretty much evenly. So, like what you said, it's not like attractiveness is only one thing. They say that they want all of these things on paper. But when they go and make their selection in the apps, it actually shows their behavior. And their behavior doesn't match their stated preference. You will find that women actually much prefer uh, what they consider good looking guys. So physical attractiveness suddenly is much more important when they make the decision. Sincerity becomes the least important, the bottom criterion out of them all. It goes from physical attractiveness to fun, to mutual interests, then ambition and intelligence are falling behind, and then lastly, sincerity. So that's what women are looking for according to their selection on these apps. That's what they're looking for. But if their belief starts to change from I'm just going to have fun and casually hook up with someone, they want an extremely physically attractive or fit person. And I think it makes sense in the sense that if you're going to casually hook up with someone, a woman always has the greater risk because she could end up getting pregnant. And so her standard is off the chart. But when she looks at her whole life and all her different priorities and having a family, suddenly it's not just physical attractiveness that matters to her. When it comes to finding a lifelong mate and she gets into that mode and that gear and she's looking for a lifelong mate, I think then it balances out and she's not just looking for physical attractiveness alone or primarily. So I think that's what the study is showing us. The apps are influencing people's behavior as much as people's behavior influence which apps are successful and popular. So this is basically what men and women imagine they're going to date. Right? It's you're going to be dating Superman, completely buff with six pack. He's tall and handsome and muscular, and I guess a lot of men also think that they'll be dating a supermodel. But it seems that no matter which app men go to and how uh, they date, whether they date by app or just traditionally, men do give women, I think, a bit more of a chance, and they find women just generally attractive. I think that's also good news for the women. Let's talk about how do people find their mates in the Middle East? Because we were chatting about that in Tabuk in the desert, and we're talking to our Arabic friends, and I think it's fascinating. So how does it start? Like they're very traditional. A lot of times the women are covered up. You don't see dating. Dating is a very Western invention. So then how do they find each other? Can you walk us through a little bit of the process?
Sure. It's very interesting to actually uh, see that even in our days, there's still a lot of couples that are getting married as a result of their parents looking out for someone they should marry with. So if I'm thinking of some of my friends here, um, some have said they have never met their wife before. And I remember I once had a teacher, you know, and she was telling us about, oh, I think I'm getting engaged. And we said, with who? And she said, well, I don't know, because I just saw him briefly I saw his face from the profile. And I said, tell us more about it. And she said, well, my mom spoke with his mom, and then they invited him over to our majlis, or the traditional Arab living room. And this specific girl had the choice, or had the option to at least see him before she would say yes or no. But she said, I was so shy that I didn't look at him. I didn't turn my head towards him. And then after he left, I asked my dad, can you send me a photo of him? And I think in our culture, in our Western culture, we would never think of agreeing to marrying with someone we've never seen, or maybe just have seen a photo of. But many times they only see their wives, or probably it's easier sometimes for the women to see their husband's photos before, but the men they only see their wives on the wedding night. Now there are ways that, yeah, a lot of the young single men and women, yeah, use to try and get to know more about the person they're going to marry. But in most cases, it could be someone from their very close family, or like tribe, and then the mom would pretty much be the one that, as a son, you would go to your mom and say, "Mom, I'm ready to get married. Can you find me somebody?" And I have friends that have done that. They said, "I'm ready." I have other friends that have gone and actually started chatting with with a workmate or classmate, but they couldn't initiate that uh, relationship publicly. They still had to go to their parents, and then the parents went met with each other, and then they prepared or planned their meeting and their wedding.
Let me mention a couple of things before all the singles raised in the Western world say, "Oh, forget that. I can't stand what you're describing, Gabriel. There's no way." I can imagine the reaction because I've seen it. But before you close your mind, and especially the Christians that believe the Bible, before you close your mind, that you have to think, well, the Western way is not working out too well, right? Relationships are failing at a higher rate here than outside, and the marriages over there are more intact. They do have divorce. I talked about that as well, and I talked about can you get a divorce in Saudi Arabia and all that, and the laws have changed and liberalized. But the first thing that I noticed in your story, and it's the same story as I heard from many Arabian men who are now happily married, the mother starts it off. So this idea that it's a patriarchy, and that means that women have no say. Actually, the most important thing in your life, besides knowing the Lord, is your marriage. And the woman, the mother, has a lot of power, has a lot to say, and she has a lot of interest in having a good daughter-in-law, and she knows her son better than the son knows himself. So it's number one, women have a lot to say, and they are very involved in this process of love. The next thing is the idea that you would marry someone that your parents chose. So your parents are involved. That means the mother has a say, your family's intact, you're respecting your parents. This is one of the main criterias when we say to the Western Christians, if you're dating someone, one of the first things you got to look out for is, do they have a father and mother? Right? And if they have a father and mother, this is already like so great, so rare that their father, their parents stay intact. If they do have that, does she have a good relationship with her father? Right? Does he have a good relationship with his mother, and hopefully both of them? But in the Middle East, you just say you take that for granted because you're assuming that your parents are there and looking out for you, and they're even involved in selecting who they think is the best choice with far greater experience and wisdom than you, and they love you in the majority of cases. They would be doing it for you. So then it's not so strange because you've already ticked off one criteria that we in the West are constantly looking out for is, are they coming from an intact family? Your parents are involved in your courtship, they're there for you, so that ticks off. Then the last thing that I hear from what you're describing is, and I'm not, by the way, I'm not idealizing it. I know that there are problems, I know there can be abuse, but I just want people to not shut themselves off so fast and say, well, that's just, ancient culture, when traditional, we're so much better now because we're the West. I don't want you to think that way, because the very fact that two people could get married based on their parents' advice, and then the marriage is turns out good, which I asked several of the people there, and they were happy with their arranged marriages, meaning arranged by their parents. And it tells me that these women must have been raised to be wives. And you look at the West right now, what are we doing to prepare our young people to become good husbands and good wives? And I would say it's nothing. We're doing the opposite of all the skills they need, all the habits they need to become good, stable, happily married people. We're giving them the opposite habits. And I have a comment here that I said I'll read later. So this is just straight from social media. And this is, a guy that's in this conversation, in this sphere where they talk about uh, relationships. And so he says, Marcus Gregory says, men are not intimidated by strong women, but far too many women believe that being aggressive rude, and generally unpleasant makes them strong. No, it makes you insufferable. It's not that we can't handle you, but that we'd prefer not to in light of better options. And the talk all the time is, you know, what are men and women looking for? Men want feminine women. Women want masculine men. And if they've been training their kids, right, the men to go out and make a living and have a, the next thing in the courtship process is if they get serious, the man has to provide a home or at least an apartment in the Middle Eastern culture. So the men are trained to think, I have to be financially responsible and provide. The women are trained, I have to be a good wife and a good mother. So then it's not so far fetched to say, my parents could, both our parents could help match people and they get married and they've not met each other for that much, but they've been prepared all their lives to be married. So I sympathize with people growing up in Western and Westernized culture. Um, you probably cannot just have blind matchmaking like in the Middle East because the pool of people that have been raised properly to become good husbands and good fathers, good wives and good mothers, it's a small pool. Anyway, so I'm very open minded to it because I travel a lot and I see strengths and weaknesses in different cultures. So the mother kicks it off. Now, there's a whole ritual from what I heard. The mother kicks it off where she goes to visit the other mother and say, hint, hint, my son is uh, eligible. Is your daughter eligible? Is she interested? So once they start that process, then what happens next?
If the parents, especially if the mothers agree on it, then different countries would have probably a bit of a different process. But they do have an engagement that eventually happens in the parents in the presence of their parents. So they would visit. Sometimes it can happen even without the presence of the lady, like in the same place. And then they would have the civil, I would call it, it's a civil wedding, which is in front of their religious authority or government authority. And then later on, they have the actual wedding. So there will be engagement, the civil wedding, and the party wedding
Hmm.
in that order.
Well,
But many times between the civil wedding and the party, it can be uh, you can have 6 months or a year because in that time the man actually goes back. So even though they're married officially, if they were to split, it would be considered a divorce. But they don't live together yet. So he goes back to his house. She goes to her house, to her parents' house, and then he works, continues to work until he has the apartment, the house, the car, or any other requirements and that she would have or that her family will have. Probably several um, various jewelries or grams or kilograms of gold, depending on the family.
now, you are fluent in Arabic. Tell me if I'm saying this book's name properly. Diwan Balatna.
Belakna.
Balakna. Diwan Balatna. What does that mean?
I believe it's so the one is similar to wedding venue or to a sitting area that you would receive for like a reception venue. And I think the Latina is that it has to do with a similar route where we came and we chatted and we had an agreement on. I believe that's what the Latina.
Okay, so it's like chatting in the living room. So, I take people to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Israel, and so I read up on Arabic culture. This is just one that I was reading, and it has a lot about courtship. And I was intrigued because the author of this one is from Jordan, and what he described to me sounded exactly like what the Saudis were telling me was the process. So I don't want people to feel scared, like, okay, the parents meet and then suddenly you're married. There is quite a little bit of ritual going on. So the correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the steps is once the mothers agree, then the male's father is like sent. He goes to represent the family. He goes then to have coffee or a meal at the other side's house, and it's all unspoken. He never will just say, blurt out, I want you to give your daughter. He will say something like, we're interested in our families, joining together, or something very subtle. Is that right?
It's very typical to Arabs and not to open up a conversation they want to have straight ahead. So they can spend hours and sometimes even days in various meetings until they would much tell you what they want or the reason they came to visit.
And I find that actually refreshing. I enjoy that culture. I enjoy having to read between the line, because the West now is like you have to blurt it out. You have to like be in your face, and people still don't get it because people have lost the sensitivity to kind of judge, um, feel the air, judge the body language, and read into people's heart. It's all like it's all law and policy, and so I like the fact that they hint, they talk, it's based on relationship. Then if the fathers agree, right, then they still ask the daughter, right? Are you interested? Are you willing? So she has to give her consent. There's nothing, in normal circumstances, they're not being forced, but it's being arranged in traditional ways so that the family stays thriving and the culture continues to thrive. So then if the daughter agrees, then he gets his first date, right? But then he's accompanied by, I think, his mother. Is that right? So his mother and he will go and visit her, and she will come out without any makeup. They say it's very important to them that, see, so in the West, when you go dating, the woman's, I mean, she's you can't tell the version, the Instagram version of her is so different than the version you're going to see in the bedroom because of all the makeup and the hairdo. So they're very practical. They're going to go over there, they're going to meet her. She's going to serve coffee. There's no holding hands. There's certainly no having sex. It's totally not like what the Westerners are kind of trained up to expect. You go there, you see her as she is, no makeup, and you see how she serves the coffee. And I think that's it. That's the first date. Is that about right?
Yes, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
It's very interesting that, as you mentioned, she does have a say, and she could say no. And I remember a lady that I knew. I think she said no to three guys, and her parents were frustrated in a way, but they wouldn't force her. Like you said, in normal circumstances, um,
Right. Right.
where yes, she can say no if she doesn't like the guy.
Right. I mean, nobody wants to live with a bunch of unhappy people, right? Life's got enough unhappiness and suffering. So we're trying to paint a picture for you that, in a way, basically, we are going to try to facilitate for you, but you have to trust that there might be a different way than the way that you've been doing it. Just the dating without any involvement of parents, without any involvement of pastors or elders, maybe that's the problem. You're not getting any married people's input, and so you're really lost. You don't know what to look for, and you end up just focusing on carnal things. So, in this process, the girl's given a chance to say no. If she says yes, then he might begin the courtship process where he goes to see her more often. But at every one of those dates, she is accompanied. So if she has a brother, the brother might accompany her, and that's still considered a date. They're getting to know each other. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
they will not be alone.
They will not be alone. Yeah. So then this explains something then, because they're so concerned about reputation. It's an honor culture. And so keeping your honor is very important. Keeping your virginity is part of keeping your reputation. That's like totally gone in the West. And again, I'm going to suggest that that's part of the problem. We're violating traditional values and eternal principles from the Bible, from the Word of God. So this is why we're having problems. They want to protect the reputation of the man and the woman. And there's like a serious vetting process. Once they start dating, there's both sides are like sending even private eyes to investigate each other, and that's totally acceptable. So they're going to start checking out what kind of reputation she has, he has, because this is a lifelong commitment. So it's not the dating process that finds this out. It's that commitment, or their version of dating is once they're committed to date and consider each other, then the two families are free to begin investigating. Um, I don't know what that process looks like. Do you?
think from what I've heard, they would ask about, yeah, uh, something would be like, do you think he would let me work after we get married? Or questions that she would have about him. So then she would probably try and ask his sisters or someone else, where does she work currently? And yeah, so probably questions. I think their greatest fear sometimes is like, is the person gonna change a lot once I marry this person?
Wow.
So that's sometimes what they're investigating or asking about. And I now have a story where the girl that was going to marry, she said, if you want us to date or like to get married, I will put it in the contract because you'll be surprised. There is a contract
It's a
that they
prenuptial,
sign.
basically.
Yeah, there's a contract that they sign about what they can do or cannot do after marriage. And this lady said, you will allow me to work up to 1,000 kilometers away from home. And I mean, in this culture, in this society, you would be like, um, many times you may have, uh, yeah, men that would not allow their wives to go to work after they get married, or would say, um, well, you can work, but only in a female environment, so not with other men. And I'm talking about that. Some are extremes, but they will care about what she wants to do after they get married, what he wants to do, what is he going to allow her to do or not. So that's the kind of like subject that they would have to look out for. Like how much they can find out about him or her before they actually sign up the wedding.
To me, it's so much better than the Western dating process where you're just going out to watch movies, having meals, and you're not really finding out. You're in fact hiding your true selves from each other. But this makes sense. So that goes to another thing about um, divorce that I heard in Saudi Arabia. So obviously there are things that we disagree with, Sharia law, and we're not Muslim, we're Christian, but there's a lot of things that are just simply traditional culture, and some things just make common sense. So I asked, what about divorce? Is it just like the man says, I divorce you, and that's the end of it? And one of our friends told me that, you know, uh, you can get a female can get a divorce under the revised, the updated laws in Saudi Arabia. I said, well, under what circumstances? And he said, well, one of the things is if the man doesn't come home. Like if the woman says, I'm going to court because my husband hasn't come back home for 3 months. Well, that's an abandonment, and that's a, grounds for divorce. If my husband has not had, intimate relationship with me for 3 months, well, that's ground for her to go to the court and say, I want a divorce. I just find that interesting because in the West, I cannot tell you how many miserable people don't even sleep with each other anymore. They're married. The Christians think that there's no other ground at all. So the Christians are very legalistic, but abandonment, violence, stopping, any more intimate relationship with each other. All of these seem like they're very, very unhealthy, and the Arab culture recognizes that that is unhealthy. That is not the state of marriage. That is the state of unmarriage. So, just to let people know, things are changing in that culture, and you can't believe everything that you hear. and you can't dismiss it all. So they go through this process. I think the chaperoning and the accompanying of daters would seem very odd and uncomfortable to Westerners. They expect, I'm make my own decision. I'm free. I do whatever I want. But the idea is just to protect both your reputation, because it's obvious you got hormones. You want to get married. The temptation will be high. So what happens? What else happens in the process of dating? There's discussion about dowry. There are visits by the mother that continues. I want to find this. At least in Jordanian culture, they said in the traditional, and when they say traditional, I guess maybe outside the city a little bit. Um, people who live in cities they just got city culture everywhere around the world. They're not as traditional. But here I've got 5 trials of the bride. So this is the groom's mother is going to test her in 5 different ways. And they all have to do with finding out, will she be a good match for her son? So here are the 5. It says that one morning the girl will be woken up with a shower of kisses by her mother-in-law at dawn to see whether she has bad breath. She will just appear. I don't know if Saudis do this, but Jordanian mothers do this. Next, the groom's mother will insist on washing her face, but her goal is to see her face again without makeup. And if she's a natural beauty, she'll pass the test as well. The third test, after a few days, the mother-in-law will visit the bride early in the morning with a loaf of bread and ask for some milk. If the bride brings the milk directly from a goat, she is considered to be a good housewife. That's the third test. 2 days later, the mother-in-law will visit the bride again with a piece of cloth and a needle. That's funny because my daughter's asking me right now as we're doing this interview. My youngest is asking, Papa, can you mend this doll? She's got this little doll the seams are coming apart, and the fluff is coming out of it. And she says, please, fix this toy for me. I don't know that I'm that good with a needle, but I know my wife is. So the mother-in-law to be will ask the bride to thread a needle. If she's successful, she's believed to have a keen eyesight. That's all. So she's not sewing a whole dress. She just has good eyesight. That's the fourth test. And the fifth and final test, the mother-in-law to be will give the bride some wool to spin. If she does so successfully, she's considered to be a good wife who will help her husband through difficult times. Isn't that a very practical thing? It's all okay when you're dating and having fun, but what about when you're going through difficult times? What kind of person is that going to be for the rest of your life? So it says here, in the cities now, girls are no longer subjected to these tests. But the idea is there that when you're having your parents involved in an arrangement, it's not like this big oppression. They're just trying to help you find out things that most people dating they haven't even considered. So that's the process. They then agree on a dowry, which is very practical from what I know in Jordanian dollars, Jordanian dinar. I think the price of a virgin's dowry is around 2,000. So is that the man's father pays the woman's father?
So it's usually the man. He needs to, like the man's family would have to pay this amount to the ladies, to the girl's family. So whether the parents of the man help him as well, but he needs to make sure that he gathers that amount of money. In Saudi Arabia, it can be between 50,000 riyals and maybe 100,000 riyals, and of course it can go much higher. That's in US dollars. It would be somewhere around $15,000 up to $30,000, and that pretty much goes to her family. It doesn't go to her. But on top of that, he needs to give gold to the girl, which she is actually going to own. It's not going to be his gold anymore. It's going to be her goal once they get married.
And he has to have some gold. So, hey, there, put your money where your mouth is, right? So that again, the dating process in the West does not involve any of this commitment. So you are putting your money and your goal where your mouth is. You're marrying two families together, and I think that's another part of the stability of traditional families and biblical families is you realize it's not just, we're two free individuals, we do whatever the heck we want. You're bringing two families together, and you want these two families to have ties that last. Because when you go through tough times, where do people turn to? They're going to turn to their family, and either that's going to make it worse, or they have this commitment with each other, and hopefully it makes it better. So it's about 3,000 US dollars is the dowry for a virgin. But they were saying that in their culture, if you marry a widow, a widow with no children, her price like is halved. So it's 1,000. And then if she's a widow with children or she's older, then it can go down to 500. So that's the Jordanian culture. It's all, they're all Arabic. They speak versions of Arabic, and they share that kind of culture. So I find that fascinating. Um, we're going to try to help singles find each other and give a little bit of guidance. And we wanted to tell you about this. This is a big announcement. So Gabriel and I have considered a very beautiful, very exotic place to bring singles. You must be Christian, you must be single, okay? You're not married, all right? And you must be looking, you must be open to a relationship. We want to bring singles only onto a Arabian Gems tour in Oman. Now, tell us a little bit about why Oman is such a great destination, a little bit unexpected for singles to go to.
So I used to live in Oman about 10 years ago, and I would consider it one of the most beautiful countries in the world, amongst several other ones here in the region. But it's a gem. It's a hidden gem, and I know their tourism Ministry of Tourism had this slogan about Oman saying, "Where beauty has an address." It's pretty much like that. So the two photos that you see behind me and Pastor Steve, they're both from Oman. You can have lush, exotic oases with palm trees, beautiful resorts with streams of water, full of green water surrounded by mountains, or you can go in the desert where you have um, very tall, amazing sand dunes. And you can experience going swimming, you can go and do dune bashing or riding a camel or a horse. So, what better place to go and meet the person you're going to live with for the rest of your life than in such a place where, we invite you to come and see.
Yeah, exactly. We're gonna have great activities for you. Did you say we're gonna go like dune riding? What? How did you say that?
Yeah, dune bashing.
Dune.
Dune bashing
Dune.
is a very common activity where you get on an SUV and then you pretty much climb the sand dunes, climb and descend at various speed, where your car is at a certain angle that you don't really get on any road. So it will bring a lot of adrenaline, excitement.
All right. We want the adrenaline. We want to see people's reaction. All right. Physical activities, hiking and sports. They tell you a lot about people that you cannot tell by sitting with them in a movie. Um, we're going to spend nearly half the time in Muscat, the capital, and half the time in Salalah. Is that the right pronunciation? What does Muscat and Salalah mean, if anything? Do you know?
Well, Muscat at the root would mean the place where something has fallen. Um, but it's the capital of Oman and has very, very rich heritage from the cultural part where you have museums, you have the port, you have the one of the oldest mosques here in the region as well. Just a very traditional souk, which is Arabic for market or bazaar, and you just get to interact a little bit uh, with that world, that we've heard about, where incense and gold and myrrh would have been, brought from, because Salalah is actually the place that has this museum of frankincense, or it's called the land of frankincense, and that's where myrrh and incense or frankincense are being harvested from, which are sap from certain trees that are grown just in that part of the world. There are very few places where you can get this from.
Wow. So it's very, very possible that Jesus got his frankincense from what today is called Oman. Back then, they wouldn't have called it Oman. But that's, yeah, that's one of the features. We're going to take you to see frankincense trees. We're going to go hiking. We're going to give you opportunities to go swimming, see a wadi, go shop, see an oasis, an archaeological park, check out the perfumes, the frankincense, eat Arabian food. You'll see wildlife. I mean, all this within 6 days. And we want you to go to discoverchurch.online/tour. If you are a pastor, a parent of someone who is single, if you are a single and you're willing to try something different, all right, you don't want to do it the same old way. And I think it's just going to be a great experience in terms of just learning. You're going to be with my wife, myself, Gabriel, his wife, and we're going to input to you. We're going to have devotion together. We're going to speak about dating and marriage from a Christian perspective, right? So you have to be a Christian to come. And somebody asked me previously, they said, well, what if I find a date between now and that tour? Do I have to cancel the tour? And I said, what do you mean? Well, he said, well, then am I still single if I went on a date? I said, what are you talking about? Single is unmarried, right? You If you are not married, you are single. So you might want to invite your new date. If you find a partner between now and then, why not invite him or her to come? And you have to be open to the fact that, yeah, you're not yet committed to each other. You're not yet married to each other. So you're going to learn for sure. And you might find out you're perfect for each other. You might find out, no, there's something better for me. So you should give yourselves that room as singles. I find people get so serious when they're dating, and they look for every opportunity to why they must be together. And then when they get married, they're looking for opportunities to get out of the marriage. And I say to the singles, please, you know, do the opposite. Do the opposite. When you're single, you're free. Enjoy your freedom, enjoy your life, and don't be so serious. Don't be so desperate to hook on to somebody. God's got somebody for you. But then when you're married, that's when you got to be ultra serious and say nothing's going to come between us. We're committed for life. We're not going to let emotions or misunderstandings just trip us up. I mean, I just heard this is a funny example, but somebody famous who's very rich, and I was surprised that he just got divorced. You know what they got divorced over? And I know there's many issues, but it's like one of those issues. When you get married, anything can become an issue. It was the temperature of the house. He wants it very cold, and she can't stand it cold. And they went through more than 10 years of arguing just about how to sleep, where to sleep. Are they hot? Are they cold? And they finally just had it with each other and they divorced. Can you believe it? And singles would never, ever think of that. They would look for, oh, those are little things and it doesn't matter. And we love each other. We're meant for each other. They're always convincing themselves to be married. But when you get married, you'd be so surprised how much people argue over nothing, over tiny little things. So we want you to do the opposite. Come, if you're single, come and enjoy the learning, the experience, expand your horizon, meet some people. Give yourselves freedom just to mingle and meet people. That's what I would encourage you to do. It's at discoverchurch.online/tour. We're going to make this, I think, at the end of September. We'll put the exact dates on for you. But at the end of September, um, the tour will start in 2025. So you've got a lot of time to save up. And I think we're helping you in another way is you don't want to date people who are broke and in debt. So at the very least, you're going to find Christians who are not broken in debt and who are adventurous, who are willing to try something new. I mean, already you're cutting the pool down to some of the very best human beings on the earth. I just think you're going to have a lot of fun. Um, can you tell us a little bit, a hint? Don't give it all away, but a hint of some of the activities that they could expect when we're together?
Yes, so I think the places that we will visit are we've uh, specifically chosen them to be different from each other. So yeah, the first days where you get some sightseeing to spending time in the desert, going through activities like I mentioned before, dune bashing or other desert activities, but also being on the coast, having access to beautiful water. So it's almost no day will be the same as the other, and activities are a range of activities. You don't have to go through all of them. You will have the choice to opt in for one of the opt out. So it's up to you on the specific areas or what you want to do. But I do encourage you to get adventures because it is um, the trip of a lifetime, and it could be the trip with a person you're going to spend.
It's a trip of a lifetime. I'm so looking forward to it. If I had not worked with you in Saudi Arabia, I wouldn't have even thought about Oman. And the more I look into it and the natural beauties, yeah, the more I'm excited for this. I'm curious, just off topic, how do they treat Christians in Oman? Is there any church? Is Christianity allowed? Can you bring a Bible? Can you wear a cross? How do they treat Christians?
So Oman has been called the Switzerland of Middle East because they've always been very tolerant and uh, very welcoming to all the other religions of the world. And especially, I know there's churches, official churches in Oman as well. They're registered churches, so government knows about them. People can go attend them freely. I believe it's on Sunday morning or Friday morning because their weekend is different than our Western weekend.
Hmm.
It's
Hmm.
it was Friday and Saturday. But yes, Christians are welcome like any other one. And as a matter of fact, locals like to talk about faith as well. So you can have your own Bible. It's it's not a Bible to wear like crosses to be too outward like, with your with practicing your faith outside of that uh, Christian place or of the church. But you can be a Christian. You can talk to people about your faith. It's an open country.
That's so good. Well, I hope between now and then we could reach out to some of these Christian churches. I'd love to include that as part of the experience, just to meet some believers, because that would really round off the whole experience. But we'll discuss that for those who want to see the oasis, the sand dunes, and the gems of Arabia. Please go and put your deposit, okay? Because we have limited space. Discoverchurch.online/tour. You put in your deposit and you're locked in, and then you have a few months to, save up if you don't have it yet, and it's going to be unforgettable. So thank you so much, Gabriel, for coming on with us, and I think we should pray. How about we pray for the singles?
Father, we're grateful. You're so kind to us. Thank you so much for everything that you've done to reach out to us, bring salvation, Lord. Thank you for the way you arranged that we would not be together for your plan for the family. Thank you that you are the head of the family. And thank you for, yeah, I pray in advance for every single person that is going to attend this tour,
Yes.
that you would bless them, that you would prepare everyone's hearts, that you would prepare also the yeah, budgets so that they can set aside for this, Lord. And I pray that they would get closer and closer as they come and visit Oman, Lord. Get closer to you, experience you at a different level, Lord. And I also pray that they will get to meet someone that is faithful to you just as they are, and they can share their life with you. I pray that you would bless a lot of singles, bro. with this ministry, with this tour, with this visit that they will have, Lord, and that this will bring you glory. In Jesus' name.
Yes, in Jesus' name. Thank you so much. Well, thank you for listening, and we are looking forward to seeing some of you in the beautiful Arabian gem of Oman. Until we see you, remember, don't give up, keep looking up. You've helped me and the Discover team take the gospel of Jesus Christ around the world. You've done it through prayer, giving, and open doors that relationships bring. Through your support, we have sent relief to the persecuted Christians, contributed towards a new van for one of the most effective evangelistic teams in Thailand, supported mission works all throughout the world. As the return of Christ draws near, we are increasing our travels to teach the Word and train Christians in evangelism, leadership, and biblical justice. Everywhere I turn, I see more needs and more opportunities to help people, to teach God's Word, and to spread the good news. I can't do it without Jesus, but I also can't do it without you. The Christian life is the most rewarding life. We suffer temporarily for eternal gains. I call on my partners to keep praying, giving, loving, and going. Sow a seed that requires faith. Give your best today at discoverchurch.online/give. That's our dedicated link, discoverchurch.online/give.